So I'm going to cover ZBrush 2021 then. So before I do that, I'll just give you a little bit of history, if that's okay. I'll give you a little bit of my history, really. So I run a small company. We've got about 6 people, and we basically create digital assets. We've done that for quite a few years now. We do a lot of TV, a lot of broadcast TV, as it's called, a lot of sports, a lot of creative drama, and we really focus on 3D assets. We do concept work, but most of the time that stretches into 3D as well. And it goes all the way back. I'm obviously at the older end of the spectrum, so I'm in my 50s now, but I've been using ZBrush for 21 years now, believe it or not. So I started in the late 90s with it, and it's probably our most used tool, which is one of the reasons I like to show it. We train it, we use it, and we promote it a little bit. And obviously I'm here today for you guys with Wacom. So one of the main things that I like to talk about is is kind of like this piece of equipment, which is what I'm going to present on today. So this is a Wacom. This particular one's a 32, but I know that's 32 inches diagonally. And I normally work on a 24, which is obviously 24 inches diagonally. So we spend most of our time drawing and sculpting and obviously using that technology. And that's the main tool that drives everything that we do. Obviously, there's a computer driving that, and the higher end the computer, the better. But I was an illustrator before I got into 3D, and a lot of what I do is driven by what I used to do, which is sketching, drawing, good with anatomy, good with creature design, because that's what I used to draw before I modeled it, and stretching that into 3D was always my dream, really. And I used to hang around people, or used to follow people who were all going into movies and working on movies, and that was always what I wanted to do. But anyone who's watching, and anyone who remembers back in the 90s, it wasn't that easy to make organic things. So we had, back in 93, we had things like Jurassic World that we all wanted to work on, and you had to have hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of equipment. And then TV shows like Babylon 5 came along and made it a bit easier. And then Pixar started with things like Jerry's Game, where we had things called subdivision modeling, which people will know who are in the audience. And that really changed my life, because it was a way to make organic things without getting really technical. So that's when we began to be able to do what's called digital sculpting, which again, a lot of people watching will know exactly what it is, but there's a real strong history behind it and how it came about. And I used to hang around people like Bay Ray, who was the lead on Gollum's face, some names like Ken Brilliant, names who you don't hear that often, because they're the guys that were doing the tech work and the modeling in the background. So, and I learned how to model and how to sculpt with people like that. And then I just literally started my own company and just went for it, really, and got lots of interesting jobs over the period of, I don't know, a long time now. But more than anything, we still look for the exciting stuff. We look for the character work. We worked on Jurassic World, the opening titles for that, Fallen Kingdom, but that we didn't get to work on the creatures, so that's always sad. And the thing that I like the most probably is, and we might get to talk about it at the end, is marrying 3D digital with traditional skills. So we do a lot of 3D print. So we like to get what we make into the real world. So sometimes we work on shows that aren't the most high profile, but they get us to allow, as to output our models. So face replacement for stop motion is very exciting. We do a lot of that with a few directors and a few companies. And then sometimes just working on huge pitches for companies. We worked for Roald Dahl and did about 8 months of work where we were looking at their entire IP. So we got to sculpt the craziest stuff. So, characters from Matilda and from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And even if that doesn't always turn into a particular film at that time, it doesn't matter. When you're a character and creature designer, you really want to work on those IP and that intellectual property, and you want to be around the people who have designed that, the 2D people, the 3D people, the physical, the sculptors, the maquette people, and that's always really, really nice to do. And that's really what we do. The one caveat to all that is this last 6 years we've moved into VR so much. So as much as today is all about ZBrush and sculpting, I think that the industry is changing in so many ways, and VR brings a whole new perspective on what we do. We might get some questions at the end about that. It's not embedded in the industry yet. So I'm doing some seminars this week which are all about how we use a Wacom, and we draw on a Wacom, and then we just jump into VR from the tablet. So that's quite interesting. So let me share my screen then. So let's talk about ZBrush then. So if you don't know anything about ZBrush, then I'll try and just give you a little bit of an overview. What our session today is about is one specific part of the new features, which is cloth dynamics. And ZBrush is a sculpting package. So the core of it is take something in there and sculpt on it. And what's changed this year is that we've got something called cloth dynamics. So I would normally, let me just do this for anyone who doesn't know. I would normally take something like a sphere. Again, apologies if you know exactly what this is all about, but if you don't, this might just help people just to give you an idea of what we do. So we sculpt on things like this. So that's a big ball of clay, and we can just move it around. We can change the topology underneath, which I won't go into, but we can then just sculpt on it like this. And that's the 101 basics of digital sculpting. That's what we do every day. We take pieces of clay in the digital form. We can smooth it down as if we're doing it with our hands, and that very quickly would be the start of our creature, and we can do all sorts of things on it. So that's 101, how we start with digital sculpting. Now that if you follow ZBrush and you follow programs like Blender and Mudbox and 3Dco, all of these really high-end sculpting programs now, that's very much the norm now. So we can do that in so many programs. It's quite common now. You can even do it on an iPad, which is crazy if you think about it. This ability to sculpt now the technology is out there and has been for so many years that you aren't limited to any one particular type of equipment or medium. Now, what I'm working on today, the Cintiq, is probably the highest end you can get. So this is the drawing pen that you've seen me holding up. That's the pressure sensitive, 8,000 levels of sensitivity. It's a 4K screen, and this is how I work every day. Really, I usually work on a screen of this size more than anything else, and that's why we do it, because it gives us that full visual experience of the 4K. The diagonally, you've got tons and tons of screen real estate, and that's what you see me working on there. Now with ZBrush, a lot of people have, over the years, having trained it for so many years, the big thing that people get stuck with in ZBrush is the interface, and the way we teach it is we get past that really quickly. So what you're seeing with me here is a configured interface. This is what I call my training interface, and basically all the tools I need are down at the bottom. All of the main features and functions are at the top, so I don't need to go hunting. And I have these side panels here that I use that have the main things I'm going to use for the sessions. So what I've got in front of me is a world. So it's a virtual world, as in a 3D world. It's not like you would get in Maya and Cinema 4D, because there is a camera, but basically what you see is what you get. I can't leave that there and then move around it like I can with a camera. So that does cause some limitations for people. But what it essentially is a floor and 3D models. And what I've done is I've just put very, very simple primitive. So yeah, from here, I've just picked a cylinder, and I would normally be sculpting at this point. And if you think of any jobs that I've done where there's a character involved, you might want to put clothes on them. Or for example, a job this week, we had to do a physical sculpt, and we had to do a very, very old Gothic table and chairs, but it needed a tablecloth. Now, in times gone by, so pre this year, what we have to do is use another piece of software called Marvelous Designer, or we have to have the skill to be able to sculpt cloth. And that is a real skill in itself. So to understand the physics of a cloth folding, or anything in the real world that is cloth based, which would include things like skin on a dragon's wings, it would include like tablecloths, obviously, it would include clothes, curtains, anything that falls and can fold would be in that category. So with ZBrush coming along, with cloth dynamics, that helps us, because now we can use it in the host program. So if I just look down here, this on the right hand side, if you look, that's subtools. I've got a cylinder and I've got a plane. And all I'm going to do is, there's a panel up here called Dynamics, this one. And I normally just pull it out to the side, and I've got all my settings here at the side. So all I have to do is be on the thing over here on the right that I want to use. And then it has to be what's called a polymesh 3D. So it has to be an editable 3D model, which it already is. Excuse me while I take a drink. The floor is the floor, and we can turn that on and off here. So the system, the ZBrush knows that that is a floor. So anything that drops in any cloth will collide with that floor. And I've just put a cylinder in. Now with ZBrush, anything you put in the scene, if you tell it over on this side here that you want to use gravity, obviously, and you want collision volumes, and that'll be the same in a lot of programs that have this. So programs like Houdini and Cinema 4D, every program that has dynamics will use this sort of system, which is, I know where the world floor is. I know that anything in my way will be a collision object. And then also we have something here called self collision, and I have that turned on to maximum. And what self collision is if you imagine a piece of cloth folding over, does it fall through itself? So if you imagine when you bend your knee and the back of your knee, does the cloth intersect? Well, that stops that happening. Now, this is really low resolution. If you look, you can see it's just a few hundred polygons. But this is how we'll start the session. We'll just do this basic one, and then we'll have a look at how that performs. And then we'll see why we do what we do on a larger creature. We'll get to the fun stuff at the end, and we'll look at something, something that, have I got one loaded up already? Can't remember if I loaded one up. Yeah, we did here. So we got some fun stuff that I think I showed this in the artwork for the session. So we'll come back to that, and we'll show something a bit more, than a cloth and a cylinder, which, it's not the most amazing thing ever, is it? So how does it work? Well, literally you've got gravity switched on, and you just run the simulation. So I'm going to do this a few different ways and a few times, so you'll see it quite often. So hit run simulation. And literally straight away there, you get the essence of what's happening. So let me just come up here. I'm going to turn it as low res as I can. It's actually colliding through here because it's so low resolution. But what it's doing is it's literally, let me run it one more time. I'll turn off that dynamic, and I'll just do it one more time for you. So let's move it a little bit first. So let's just grab the move tool at the bottom here, and I'll just move it around a little bit. So what's happening now is it's going to fall in a slightly different way because we've already told it what we want it to do. And what I'll do, just to make it a bit more fun, hopefully, the cylinder's still there, but we've just hidden it. We've just turned it off. So we'll run that simulation again. If we run that, we can keep running it over and over again, but we pretty much know that if we had it at a higher res, so let me go one level higher like that, you can see it's already starting to look like cloth. And even at this very basic level, we can get really nice results. So let me come all the way back again. So I'm just using Control Z there. I'm just undoing it. So first of all, we'll go up another resolution. So we'll do Control D, which is just up like times 4 the amount of polygons. So you can see now every polygon's 4 times. That's only still 4,000 polygons. So it's still very, very low res. The cylinder is still there, and we'll just do it one more time. We'll just see what happens. It just looks a little bit better, but you can see the fidelity is getting better straight away. So, and it's still calculating. So let me stop that. I'll run it again, and I'll turn the wireframe off, and I'll put that button over here on now, which is called dynamic. So dynamic subdivision basically is using an algorithm, a subdivision algorithm on the whole thing, rather than subdividing it once, then again. It's just doing one that I can turn on and off. And that's called all sorts of different things in different programs, but it's basically hypernerbs in Cinema 4D, and it's, I think it's the 3 key in Maya. It's a very, very standard algorithm that we all use. And then run simulation again. And now you can really see the power of where this is going. So what that's doing now is it's still calculating now, and we can stop that. So to stop it, I'm just hitting escape. And now we can use some normal tools. There are actually brushes. If you hit B in ZBrush and you want to start looking at all the different brushes, and then C would give me, isolate everything that's C. And there's cloth dimple, cloth fold, cloth hook. So let's just try cloth hook, for example. That allows me just to hook up the cloth like that, as if I've grabbed it with the hook, and it's size dependent. Now, I don't use these a lot yet. I've only been using this for a while. I'm at the minute at the stage where I'm see how it makes a, see how it's, let me just zoom right in for you. It's actually moving that around, but it's still using the dynamics underneath. So rather than what I was going to do, which is just this, the move tool, this is just grabbing a chunk of geometry and moving it around. It just happens to be that I'm using cloth. Those other brushes, so again, B, C, and then all of these crazy cloth brushes make it a very, very useful set of tools, because let's just try a few different things. So cloth nudge, for example. So say you've done a scene and you want to do like a bed with pillows, and you've got somebody lying in there, and the dynamics has run, and the cloth has done what it needs to, but it still isn't right for your scene. And sometimes you'll be using this for 3D printing. You'll be using it for sometimes what we call collision objects for. So sometimes you might need an object that you would run water off. So you'd need it to do exactly what the real world would want it to do. So these brushes here now give us that the brushes are still using the physics, which is, I don't know about you, but I just find this amazing. I've used Marvelous Designer for years, and cloth has always intrigued me, but to have it in my sculpting program is quite liberating. It means I don't need to go out and use that other software. And I suppose if you're an animator, this isn't as exciting if you're working on, well, games or film, where the cloth has got to be animated and dynamic. That's not what this is for. This is for giving you a really good visual representation of what your end product will look like. So we might make something like this, and then it might be remade again in Marvelous for the animator, or it might be remade again. There's a whole industry, and again, some of you might be this role, but cloth dynamics is a job. So if you want to just do cloth, you could be hired to use Maya for cloth, and also, again, I'm speaking to the wider audience here, and then people who don't do this for a living. There's, you can get hired as the hair groomer, and the guy that does the hair, or the girl that does the hair, and the person that just focuses on the liquid dynamics and smoke dynamics. So physics and dynamics is an industry now, in terms of, there's programs like Houdini that the next level up from where we are here now. So let's just grab it a little bit higher up and just see what happens. See how I'm switching it all around. Again, those folds are getting quite realistic. We've done jobs, even this week, we've done jobs that actually, when they're 3D printed, you still think they're cloth. They actually really do look like cloth. If you focus on, see how it's folding and creasing there? This is really, really amazing, because it's actually still calculating what's going on. It's not just moving that geometry. And if I want to do, I'll tell you where this is really useful, is when you're doing statues, or if you want to create things like if you were doing something sort of like doing a Bernini piece, where you've got a very, very cool statue, and then you want to get the cloth over the top. Something that Bernini as a sculptor was amazing at was making cloth look like it was transparent when it was solid marble. And if anyone doesn't know that kind of work, it's if you want to be a sculptor, and you are you're looking at this as a job, go and look at the works of Bernini and look at how he was doing what, the pitiful thing that we do. He was doing it in marble, all that time. He's one that I would recommend you go and study. So let's just see if I can run this back a little bit now. So this is a great one in ZBrush, this little history line at the top here. So I'm going to run that all the way back for a reason, because I want to do what I've just done with it in a different way. So the cylinder's still there. We don't really need it this time, but it's there. We'll be getting onto creatures in a moment. It's the higher level. So we're just checking, Shift and F. We're looking at the topology, the wireframe. But then in here on the left, if we look at gravity, we can do this, which is Liquify. And I like this a lot because this is where I start getting into like fantasy realms. So Liquify is, imagine dropping this cloth into a vat of oil now, or imagine dropping this cloth into water, or imagine if this is flowing in a different way. So you'll see it run differently now. I'll run it with the dynamics off. So in fact, it is off, I think. Yeah, it's already off. So we've got now gravity on. We can say how much gravity we want because we've got gravity strength of 10, which is the one it comes in as default. You can even say -10. So you can make gravity work the other way, which you can do in most dynamic programs. But Liquify hangs it in that vat of liquid. So just watch this calculate now. So this is the lowest res, so it's going to go quite fast. So it's a lot slower, it's got a slightly different angle, and it's a lot more liquid. So let me just do Shift and F to just double check it, go back one. And now what I'll do is what I did before, which is I'll pull some dimples into it as if it's moving in water. So let's think of this more as a cape rather than a tablecloth. And we'll put, so I've just made some quite sweeping changes to it. So we'll put dynamic on, which means it's now super high res, or it thinks it's super high res. Let's change the material for a minute just to make it a little bit more different. So looks like a car bonnet now. And now let's run the simulation. So Liquify gravity, run the simulation. And you can see now we're looking like it slows down because obviously it's now thinking it's in a liquid. I'll go even higher on the resolution. We come back one more. Delete that lower again. So I'm saying keep it super high res for me. I'll even leave the dynamic on and we'll make it even more dramatic now. I think now we can take that cylinder away actually. So all we've got left is the cloth and we'll just play with the cloth a little bit. I hope everyone can see this because it's quite dark now. Should be okay.
Looks perfect.
Okay, cool, thank you. I'll just pull it out a little bit more now. In fact, let me just do one bit that goes. So now I'm beginning, I think you're already beginning to see where this can go. So if you're thinking about this now, instead of it being a shirt or a tablecloth, if you can start thinking about this as on a creature, so if this was the one I'm going to talk about today, like wings on a creature, then this folded look is going to start to be useful. So let's run the simulation. So look at that now. So instantly we're getting a lot of extra free stuff there. So I'll stop that simulation. I'll move it again. Move it crazily now. I'm going to move it like a whole lot more now. Run that simulation again. And look at the folds. Let's pause that and let's have a look at what we've got. So that is fantastic. We haven't even got into we're not going to cover off all these crazy things here because we've got the ability to inflate, deflate, expand and contract. So if you can apply what I'm showing you here, and if you think to yourself, let's make like a Michelin man, big balloon guy, or if we make a balloon animal, or you can literally take your bag of geometry. So you'd, rather than doing a cloth, you would make a ball or a box or your sculpt. And then you can put seams in it and then you can inflate it, which would mean it would pinch at the seams. So you've got the ability to do all of that crazy stuff. But obviously what we're thinking about here is using it on a cloth, like skin on a wing of a dragon or a creature. And already I think hopefully you can see why it will be exciting, because we've already got folds and creases. We could easily delete those out where the skin's a bit rotted. There's a couple of things that are not good yet. So one, there's no thickness, is there? So it's just a single-sided polygon. So that would be a problem. And two, it's not the right shape, because dragon wings or creatures' wings aren't square, or they aren't made of blocks. So let's have a think about that. So before we actually go to the creature, let's peel it back a bit. So we'll peel it right the way back to here. In fact, I'll go back down that resolution one and I'll show you what we can do. So instead of trying to add geometry that would make this a thickness, what I will do is I will need something to collide it with. So I'm going to bring back in, it doesn't really matter, I'll just bring back a cube.
Glenn,
yeah?
Someone is saying it's not a question, but they love your t-shirt.
Oh, lovely, thank you.
There you go.
That's made my day. I assume I obviously assume that they know exactly what the t-shirt is. So
I'm sure.
that would is probably akin. In fact, I would imagine that everyone on this call knows what this t-shirt is. So it's a Wayland Yutani t-shirt. So, and it says "Building Better Worlds." So it's from Aliens. So we're back on the plane. Now, before we do it, if you look at the dynamic again, so come down to geometry, have a look at dynamic subdivision, turn it on, and then there's a lot to play with here. So we've got this, which is thickness. So if you look here and then really just play with this thickness, look at that. So that's now not I've gone a bit crazy on purpose, because we want to have a look at what that does in this low resolution. So if we turn the dynamic off, sorry, I can't turn the dynamic off because of the thickness. I'm gonna have to run it like that. So I'll run it in this way because it'll look a bit crazy. We'll leave Liquify on and run the simulation. It's gonna go a lot slower now because we've got double the amount of depth. Look at it folding down here. Look what it's trying to do. So that's now giving you like a folded effect down the side, and it's trying its best to work out. So this is like a mattress falling, or this is when you're doing a piece of foam. And where I've used this already in the few weeks that I've used it for saddlebags, I've used it for blankets rolled up on the back of things, and it just gives us a way to, it just gets us one stage further on, without having to spend all that time sculpting the folds and the creases. So let me use the move tool again. So now I'm just making it a bit bigger on one side. It always seems to respond better when you've dragged it around a little bit. It gives you a little bit more, well, you'll see now. And then we've got Liquify on, and we'll knock that gravity down a little bit and see what happens. So I've gone just down to about 8, and then run the simulation again. Now look at that. So I'll run it again. I'll do it from different views for you to show you what I'm getting. Now, the reason that is holding together well, you can see how it looks fluid and liquid on the edges, is there's a number of reasons. So one of the main ones is I've got this on here, self-collision. So what I'm saying there is don't fold on yourself. So it's got a thickness, and it's got a rule to say don't collide with you, or do collide with yourself, don't go through yourself. So no, so self-collision is a thing that I would want. And then it just basically does that. So that in itself is, again, you can see why someone like me would love this. I'll just turn it on an angle. I'll run it one more time, and then we'll move on. So again, you wouldn't probably want to do it with that thickness unless you're doing a mattress or something like that. You see it peeling down behind the back of that. Now, what you might do, and what some of you will inevitably do, is use this for things like cowls and capes, and sometimes the thickness really matters. So let me just go back again. We keep going back, but it's good to make sure this is firmly embedded in everybody's mind. So dynamic subdivision on, and don't go as thick. So I'm bringing that thickness down to a reasonable sort of thickness like this, and that can be changed at a later date. But a lot of what we do will be frozen in terms of 3D. So we will do what's called a decimation, and we'll send it to 3D print. And if you're 3D printing, you will probably backfill behind all of this stuff anyway. But having that thickness instantly gives you a starting point. So let's one more time, and then we will move on, I promise. Trouble is with this stuff is I enjoy it as well. So it's great showing it, but it's also really, really fun to do. So if anyone hasn't yet had the opportunity to try this, then, you know, go and get it. And if you don't have ZBrush, then it's worth getting the demo just to even have a look at this one tool and run that subdivision, that simulation there. And look at this edge now. Let me freeze it. Look at this edge. This is where we're going next. So this is giving us quite a nice defined edge. Obviously it's rounded here, but that's the kind of thickness I'd go for something that's going to be sculpted. Now, one more thing on this bit is, how do we stop it from moving? So if I want to make it into a cape, so for example, if this was my cape and I had a character in there, there was a body that it was going to fall on, and I've used this to, I've got a thickness, I already know I've got a thickness. I'm going to bring it around here. The cape would be like this. Now, I did some work for Pixelogic literally 20 years ago this year. And I remember one of the very, very first posters we did was an angel with a cape. And I remember thinking, one day when I'm older, I'll have a way to make this, because I had to do it by hand and it was crazy, crazy hard. And here we are, you know, it's come full circle and we've got it all to play with here. So what I'll do is do something called masking. So I'm just going to change the masking brush so it's called Mask Lasso. What that means is I can just run a mask like this. It's like a pen, basically. I could even run it down into here, look, like so, and I can blur that mask as well just by clicking with the stylus. And now let's run it again and see what happens. It might not work, it might work. Oh yeah, works like a dream. Look at that. So now straight away, you can imagine this is with a cylinder and one piece of a square. So imagine where this goes when you take this into character land or creature land. It's just, I know I'm enthusing about it, but it's one of the most exciting feature additions that I can ever remember. And I wasn't on the beta team this time, so I never got to play with it this year, which is, and now I'm really, really regretting that, because it's such a great tool. So let's just keep squidging it around. We've got Liquify on, don't forget. So it is a bit more liquidy. I think that's not the right word, is it? Liquidy, but there you go. Let that one calculate.
Works fine, Glenn. I just want to tell you that you should wrap up in like 5 minutes, because we have several questions for you.
Whoa, nice one. So I'm going to quickly show, well, I can't believe it's gone that quick. That's crazy. So let's just make some dragon wings then quickly. The good thing about this, when you're presenting stuff like this, it's what I call an easy sell, because this is fun. This gets you out of your day. If your job is to make this stuff for a living, being able to make, you know, dragon wings and stuff like that inside your sculpting program is fantastic. So I'm just going to go higher res, delete the lower again. I'm going to, well, I'll go another level up, delete the lower, and then let's get everything in line. I'm going to actually draw the shape of a dragon wing now, or a wing of some kind. So I'm going to go back to that masking tool, and I'm going to mask out something like this. It won't be exactly right, because we'll have to show it on the actual dragon wing itself. So, but if I'm gonna, I'll probably run out of time, which I always do. So I just thought I'd show you this as quick as I can. So all I'm doing is masking here now. And if I can give you one tip about ZBrush, it's learn how to mask really, really well. And that gives you a lot of things like hide and show. And it really gives you a good start with a lot of the painting tools. So we'll just we'll hide these points, we'll delete the hidden, and we'll close the holes. These 3 buttons here together, that solves a lot of problems for you if you're a ZBrush artist and you're sometimes struggling to find everything, is what I mean. So if that's the dragon wing, looks a bit rubbish around the edges, so I'm not massively bothered. I'll do what's called a dynamite. In fact, no, I won't, because look, it's making holes in it. So I'll just do a Control-D instead. So we've gone upper resolution. I'll smooth them down by just holding Shift. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to paint where will be the dragon. So if you think about that dragon I showed you, that we're going to get a quick look at this one here. I keep saying dragon, it's nothing like a dragon, but it's got dragon wings. So imagine this kind of effect here, which I have got a couple pre-made to show you. This sort of effect here. So you've got the bone structure underneath, and then you apply the cloth over the top is where we're going with it. So let's go back to our dragon wing. I've lost it now. Where did it go? Here. So now what we'll do is we'll mask out again the edges like this, and that means it can't fall through those, or it shouldn't fall through these edges. I have had some failures when doing this. Now, if you had this bit of skin on your model, for example, you'd be in a good place to make it work better. So we'll go move tool. We'll just give it a head start. So you can see what I'm doing there. I'm actually just folding it a little bit to see what would happen. Let's just go back a bit there.
There's many curious questions, Glenn.
Oh, that's good. That's what I want to hear. I think the questions are always the good fun, really. So we've got the skin on a framework. If you had put the framework in, so let's go back to geometry and let's put dynamic subdivision on. So we've now got it's rough. We haven't done any work for this yet. We've not cleaned these edges or anything. So let's just see what happens. It's going really slow there. Look, oh my gosh, look at that. This is completely unpredictable. I love it. So that's kind of inflating it a little bit there. So let me just try that without doing it. So I'll just turn that off for a moment and we'll just see what it runs like that. So you can see how it's dropping through. I have no idea what's happening. I've done something really crazy, but that is so good that it happens. It's falling through without having any thickness. It's as if there is some kind of fracturing going on in here. Now, again, let me just pause it. Could very well just be an error. But even with that error, I think it's got a two-sided on there. I think I left it on. But anyway, basically, you can see where we're going.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get some questions.
Yes, I love the enthusiasm that you actually put into everything that's happening. Oh, I didn't know this and that. And I love it. You're so good, Glenn.
The thing is with what we do, before you ask the question, the thing that a lot of people listening will know is that 50% of what we do is experimentation in 3D. And then about 40% that's left is finding solutions. So it's mess around, find a solution, and the 10% of creativity that's left is what we deliver. So.
Okay, so we're back at the Q&A end session, and Glenn's giving him his passion for sculpting and also following these, can I say, horrible monsters? Do I offend you?
If you want. No, not at all. Not at all.
Looks scary to me, at least. I do have a question here. Does Glenn recommend starting out with ZBrush? Cost less?
Sorry, say that again.
Does Glenn recommend starting out with ZBrush? Question mark.
Yeah, so here's the thing, and this is where I can get quite contentious with software. So you can get Blender for free, and Blender it's an amazing tool, and you get sculpting for free. And I recommend, if you can't afford ZBrush and you want to do some sculpting, you either get Blender and just do the sculpting and learn it. It's all good learning. Or you've got something for free called ZBrush Core Mini, which gives you an idea about sculpting. So if you remember that one. But the thing that matters is, if you want a job, there's many more jobs with ZBrush than there is any other sculpting program. You've got things like Mudbox, great, good program. I used it all the time back in the day. But if you want to do this for a living and you want to be hired for most studios, most game companies, then ZBrush is the thing. So you can start with the free one. Then there's one called ZBrush Core, which is a cut down version of everything I've shown you today. But everything that you use then goes into the main ZBrush, so you're not wasting anything. So Blender, definitely, if you've got no budget, ZBrush for everything else. And somebody in the audience will say, well, what about 3D Coat? Well, yeah, 3D Coat's another amazing package with something called voxels. So I would say that another option would be the 3D Coat, especially if you're going into the concept art world, because there's a lot of tools in 3D Coat that we don't have in ZBrush for things like what we call voxels, but I won't get into that. But then you've also got to consider VR as well. So.
Okay, thank you. And are sculpting packages like Cinema 4D and Mudbox interoperable with ZBrush, or do they use separate workflows?
So almost every major package has sculpting now. There's a couple of big things that you need to bear in mind. So ZBrush was written on an architecture that doesn't use the GPU or the graphics card. So ZBrush is apart from plugins, ZBrush runs on CPU, so the main chip and the RAM. So that makes it an amazing tool. A lot of other things dip into the graphics card and get problems. The problems that I get with most other programs, so that's Modo, Cinema 4D, Maya, and Blender, is that unless you're on a power machine that's got an absolute mountain of RAM, then I fall into problems when I get into the higher millions. So when you're on a production, you will be using millions and millions and millions of polygons in each subtool. And I can't work in production without being able to do that. And the one that handles it week in, week out, day in, day out is ZBrush. So I use Cinema 4 every day. Cinema 4D is a package that we use for TV all the time. We use Maya and quite a few other packages. And what we do is we go back and forth between those programs all the time. So we make it in ZBrush if it's a sculptural item. If it's mechanical, we sometimes make it in Maya or in Cinema 4D or all the time in those programs. And then we mix them up with what we call the maps. So out of ZBrush, I might get a low polygon and a high polygon, take it to Substance Painter, and then send it to either Cinema or Maya or all those other places. So they all rely on each other, really. So you could say, well, Cinema 4D has sculpting, so you could stay just in Cinema for everything. And Maya has sculpting now, so you could just stay in Maya for everything. But you would find overall that most people would dip into another package for their sculpting as an average, I would say.
Okay. Does the new ZBrush Dynamics feature react to wind forces?
I don't think it has wind forces. There's no additional wind, but what you can do is change the direction. So you can change your gravity. So you can't put in additional modifiers. So when I'm using it in Cinema, for example, we put in like a little wind farm kind of thing coming from the left, or we say, can you please make the gravity reverse during an animation? So it definitely doesn't do that. So if you look here on the left-hand side on my screen, they're pretty much what you've got to play with. So you can, for example, just set the direction, and that gives you where it would be. You could reverse it, but no, it doesn't.
Okay. And another question, if you're having a Wacom device around, or if you're not having, rather, would it be possible to 3D sculpt with your mouse? Love the results.
Yes, so the answer is yes, you can, but I would not recommend it to anyone ever. And bear in mind, I'm not a salesman. I don't have to sell anything. So the thing that you've got to remember, if I've got a mouse handy to show you, this is a mouse. So the thing with a mouse is it is a digital device, but essentially it's analog. It's either on or off. So if you're using that to sculpt, what you've got is you're either getting something or you're not. Now that's exactly not what we need. What we need is one of these, and this one's got the higher end of the Wacom products. Obviously, I'm using the higher end, and it's expensive. But if you get the most basic, cheapest tablet that you can buy, it's still much, 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 much better than a mouse. Simply because even if you only had 2000 levels of pressure, that means when you start to press on your sculpting, it's like, imagine sculpting with your thumb. If all you could have is add clay or flatten, it's just not enough. So the reason a pen is fantastic is because built into the nib is the ability to say, give me more the more I press. And that's the big, big difference. So I've never, ever yet trained anyone with a mouse because they get left behind they can't get the gradation. They can't, you know, you can't draw with a mouse in the same way because it's, and people do, and people I still model sometimes in some 3D packages with a mouse where I use a 3-button mouse with the middle mouse button, but anything sculptural, no.
You don't recommend it.
No.
So if I go on a personal level, what do you think is your key to your success?
Oh, wow. My wife, I think.
No, I mean, it's
So,
the time pressure when you're sculpting, I guess, as every other phase in the production, or
not really. I mean, again, anyone who's in the industry listening to this will know exactly what I'm saying here. So you never get a job coming in or your boss saying, sculpt this for me. We've got tons of time. You've got loads of time. Every single job needs to be done tomorrow, and it needs to be done quicker than you have the time for. That's generally how the real world works. So
that's the challenge. You have all the sculptures in your head because it looks so easy when you do it, and you just
having it in your head is so the way I teach it and the way I was taught is all of these nice tools and all of these fancy software and all of the hardware is nice. This has gone into a screen now, the screensaver, which is nice. This isn't mine, just to be really clear. This is the normal ZBrush screensaver.
Okay, so I shouldn't say anything then.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure people don't think it's mine. It says at the bottom there. So you need to learn the basics to do what I do for a living and what everybody does for a living. The people that do it really well, including the people that go into VR, they're all artists who know the basics. So understand perspective, understand light and shade, understand anatomy is crucial. And you don't need anything electronic to do any of that. You can do all that with pen and pencil. The people who get that nailed first are the ones that can learn all of this. The software is easy. I genuinely, I'm not being flippant. It's compared to learning all of that and practicing all of that, you know, the software ability is secondary. I would much rather hire someone who is an amazing artist with a pencil and I'll teach them how to use ZBrush. It's very difficult. I can't give that skill in a short space of time. That takes practice. It takes repeating. It takes the
experience.
Old 10,000 hours thing. So it's about understanding the core principles before understanding the software. Really, genuinely, I can sculpt. You know, most people who do what I do, you could change software in a week. It's really not a problem for this kind of software. I mean. So
it's all about trial and error and also loads of experience. Million thanks, Glenn. I need to wrap it up, and it's been really interesting to follow you and your work, and especially live, not pre-recorded.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hope to see you again. And for all the viewers, don't forget, tomorrow 10 a.m. we're back for the third session or the webinar. So please come back and stay tuned, and talk to you soon again. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.